It's that time. Your fix is here. College football is a year-round discussion with these two. Here's JC and Morgan. Mike Morgan of ESPN and JC Sherbert of 24/7 Sports have you covered. Beginning right now.
And a good morning if you're listening live. Good afternoon, good evening, whatever the case may be. If the many of you that listen to this particular program at various times of the day, during various tasks of the day, whether it's working out, taking the kids home from school, shopping, heck, you might just be right now in a cubicle at work saying, I need my college football fix. I'm just going to tune into JC and Morgan. The boss isn't looking. Who will know? Is there going to be any decline in productivity of the widgets if that happens? Probably not. We welcome you to episode number 242. It is a special one. We've been very guest heavy in the off season over the years. As you know, we've had so many great announcers and people that cover the sport. None better than the guest today. He is a Hall of Famer in every sense of the word. Recently retired, the legendary Vern Lundquist. My introduction to Vern, when we have him on, is going to be probably the longest introduction I've ever had because there's just so much to cover with his career. You think of the people that have done this in the profession of sports announcing, hosting, everything from play-by-play to sideline and everything in between. Vern's done it all, and he did it for a long, long time. So we're going to have him on. He doesn't do a lot of interviews, and the reason he did this one, I'm not going to say that I'm friends with Vern Lundquist. That would be a stretch. Although I think everybody feels like they're kind of like everybody. You kind of feel like you know Vern. People have kind of joked Uncle Vern. He just feels like the lovable uncle that you had or wish you had that would come to the family barbecue or cookout, and Vern would just like charm the pants off everybody and with the dulcet tones and just a very affable person. And sometimes, and I've noted this over the years in the past, people that you think like the most folksy people that you see or hear in broadcasting actually in real life are not that way at all and are not very friendly people, sometimes not even very good people. Vern's the real deal. And I only met him. Well, that's not true. I met him multiple times in passing. Sometimes he was calling a game on TV. I was calling a game on radio. But I met him when he was inducted into the National Sportscasters and Sports Writers Hall of Fame in 2007 in Salisbury. He was inducted in the Hall. I won for my work in the state of South Carolina. And I've just kind of been able to stay in touch. And he agreed to do this. To my knowledge, he's still living in his home with his wife in Colorado. So there's a lot to cover there, and we will get to it, and we will have a whole lot of fun. Just recount. I mean, obviously, JC, when you think of college football, so many of our listeners throughout the country and throughout the Southeast will think of the SEC. And when you think of the SEC on CBS, for all those years, it was Vern. It was Vern from 2000 to 2016. And you want to talk about iconic moments. There's so many that he had a chance to be a part of. And his calls are legendary and they're memorable. So we will get into that. I mean, he used to be the voice of the Dallas Cowboys. A lot of people don't know that. I was introduced to him when they used to play his calls on NFL films of legendary moments that the Cowboys had when he was their radio announcer. He joked with me once what some people remember him for is hosting Bowling for Dollars. It's a little bit before our time, but people still
I remember.
Do you really? I never saw that show.
I remember Bowling for Dollars. I remember kind of the commercials for it. I don't think I ever sat down and watched it.
Okay.
I had no idea Vern Lundquist was the host of that show.
Yeah.
I was probably like flipping to the Flintstones. Like I was.
Right. It was an insanely popular show. It was an incredibly popular show. So we'll ask about just the trajectory of a marvelous career, which, oh, by the way, included recently calling his 40th Masters back in February of this year. 40 Masters and so many legendary moments from Nicklaus to Tiger and everybody in between. We'll get to the JC5, a lot going on. JC, you and I are a part of another show, and we were touching on some interesting hypotheticals, including I threw out a question that I just was kind of chewing on stuff. The brain, you never know where it's going to go. As my wife will tell you, sometimes it's a scary place. She doesn't want to know. She's afraid what's in there. And so often this time of year, in addition to baseball going on and the NBA playoffs, it's college football is and football in general. It's just on a constant loop. Okay. And the NFL draft has come and gone, and spring football has come and gone, but we still have football on the brain. So I was thinking about this. 16 teams now in the SEC. That'll become official in a matter of days. That means 16 coaches. If you were to start, and you pointed out a very good distinction on this. Not necessarily starting it out like a new program, like an expansion team in the pros. But if you were just somebody got fired at a particular job, a middle of the road program, let's just say a program that's had some highs and lows, not a dominating, giant like an Alabama, nor like a school that is, let's just face it, having a tough time, whether
Mississippi State.
Yeah, if you want to do an SEC
anywhere Mike Leach is coached, Mississippi State, Washington State, Texas Tech,
yeah, that's a good.
Kentucky.
I like that. Anywhere
the
Mike
Leach, where the late great Pirate coached. Yeah, that's the type of program we're talking about.
So we were debating, like, okay, of the 16, who would you, if you could hire anybody, you can poach them for whatever reason. You've been given that incredible gift that they're not going to say no. Of the 16 current SEC coaches, who would you want? And names came up everywhere from DeBoer. I said Lane Kiffin. I believe our producer, Phil Molinax, mentioned Mike Elko. You could go a number of different ways. And I stated the reasons for Kiffin, and I wouldn't have said this 10 years ago now. I was not Team Kiffin 10 years ago. But today, when I look at what he's done recently at FAU, I'm not going to overlook that because they weren't good before him and they haven't been that great after him. And what he's done at Ole Miss, he's been an elite play caller to the point where Nick Saban begrudgingly hired him, knowing some of the baggage, and he got results. He's always gotten results from an offensive mind standpoint. He needed to clean some things up. He'd be the first one to tell you. He's a different guy now. And Ole Miss, if we had a 12-team playoff, would have been in the last 2 years, and they're projected to go this year. I never thought I'd be saying that about Ole Miss football. So that was my argument for Lane. Your argument for Kalen DeBoer is also a good one. Guy's been a winner everywhere he's been, and not just like a little bit of winning, like a lot of winning. And so if he does that, I don't think anybody's matching the GOAT, what he did in Tuscaloosa. But if he just keeps keeping Alabama playing for championships, that's an interesting choice. A guy like Elko with what he did at Duke and an elite coordinator before that. There's a lot of different ways you could go with that.
Yeah, I like the more with less guys. Certainly Elko's one. And I thought about Mark Stoops too, but I don't think now with the transfer portal and everything, and you never know, Ed Stoops had the transfer portal. It may not have taken 4 years to build Kentucky into what they are and to be the consistent overachiever that program is. If I were starting from scratch, or because we don't really have colleges like the University of Phoenix or whoever, they're not going to or let's just say like University of Chicago decides we want to be back in big time football. We're in the Big Ten academically. Give us a spot. So the Stags, I think that's what their nickname is. They come back rolling and they're starting a program from scratch. If that's the case, I'm going, or if it's like an SMU death penalty situation, or if it's, some kind of catastrophic where your whole roster's gone or whatever. I'm going with Lane because that's kind of building it up from the ashes. And he's been in situations where, FAU, that's a tough situation. Tennessee, when he got there, was tough. And he's got the ability, the charisma to go out, raise money and get people excited, even if they're not necessarily winning. Plus his style of offense is probably a little more exciting than Kalen DeBoer's, although they're both gifted play callers and offensive masterminds. Kiffin, he's just a little bit more of a personality. But if you're looking like I said, like a Mississippi State or Texas Tech, you look at Kalen DeBoer, he's won everywhere, and he's done it different ways. He took over for the legend at Sioux Falls, went 66-3. We'll see what he does when he takes over the Legend Alabama. At Washington, they had the Jimmy Lake experiment for 2 years, and it got gutted. And then he comes in there and nobody was hyping his portal classes. Nobody was hyping Rome Azume, or however you say it. Rome, is it Azume?
You got it.
Rome Azume, who, by the way,
Azune.
hopefully for my Bears, his hamstring's okay. And I watched this film the other day, Mike, and I do have to say to you, I think I'm on Team Mike Morgan when it comes to best receiver in the draft now. I kind of broke him down like an analyst instead of just watching. That dude does things tough catch wise that it's just so rare. And he's so springy. Yeah.
For those that don't know, I said again, I'm a draft nerd and watch every pick every year. Have done so for over 20 years. I will call it a hot take. Let's call it a lukewarm take. I think 5 years from now, we're talking about him being the best wide receiver in this draft. And yes, that does include Harrison, and it does include some the LSU talented wide receivers. Odunze to me was ridiculous. When you think of what Washington had with Penix, and of course I'm based in Atlanta, so all the talk has been Penix, and how do you justify the pick when you get Kirk Cousins? But they had 3 NFL drafted receivers. They had Michael Penix, who was the most accurate through the prettiest ball for the last 2 years in college football. They had some other people on defense drafted. Like DeBoer got talent to come to Seattle. It wasn't just like the feel-good story. Look at this team from the Pac, now the Big Ten. No, they were pretty loaded.
And he identified it.
Right.
I mean, those guys weren't weren't lining up to sign these guys. I mean, Penix was kind of like, injury, who knows? Now, look, as an OC, he elevated Indiana. Before Indiana, he was at Fresno as the OC and elevated them, and then went back to Fresno, elevated them during the pandemic, which had to be difficult. You take over Washington, you elevate them. So he's elevated like powerhouses like Sioux Falls, and probably, I don't know how you elevate Alabama, but if anybody can keep him there, it's him. And then you got situations he's taken over and fixed. So he's kind of a fixer, builder, who's also back in the Division II level, done some Kirby Smart type of things where, the other guy was really good and he took him to that next level. So that's why I chose him. But I do think a lot of Lane Kiffin as far as a spark for a program. Ole Miss kind of sneakily hired him. Matt Luke didn't really work out. There were some questions because Matt was recruiting pretty well. They didn't know he's a native son. They hated to get rid of him. But, boy, they snatched up Lane Kiffin, and then the pandemic hit, and nobody knew what to think. And the next thing you know, he's putting 45 points on Bama, and laughing about it. So I don't think you can go really wrong with either selection. I'd probably have reasons to eliminate all the other guys. Although I did not, in my mind, consider Shane Beamer. I recused myself from discussing him. So just for a lot of reasons. But the other 13, other 15, I could find out. I think they're below the 2 we picked.
Right. I mean, we talked about Sark as well, and that's another guy who, as you pointed out, look, it's Texas. You got all the advantages in the world, and that's 100% right. But Tom Harmon and Charlie Strong had those same advantages, and they couldn't get over the top. And they had embarrassing losses to programs like Kansas, not current Kansas, awful bottom feeder, would get smoked by a MAC team, Kansas, and they somehow found ways to lose, and that kind of helped seal their fate in both cases. Eli Drinkwitz, look, if Eli takes Missouri to the playoff this year after being kind of on the hot seat last year before they had a memorable season, then Eli's stock is going to skyrocket. He is going to be in a different strata that he is right now. And there's a number of interesting names. And of course, what about Kirby Smart? I think everybody has respect for Kirby Smart. I think people still look at the Georgia job, and Mark Richt did pretty damn good things there in his own right, and left it in a very good place for Kirby. And so Kirby maybe won't get the national respect that he deserves, just because people have always assumed Georgia should be a national power, and for whatever reason they were not.
If I were hiring let's say they fired James Franklin, and that was the discussion, and not like a Mississippi State or Texas
Right,
Tech.
right.
Kirby would go to the top of my list.
I'm with you.
There's very few guys that have taken over great situations and then gotten them over the finish line. Most of those programs that stumble at the end, they never get, it's tough. Oregon's kind of that way. They really don't have anything else to do out at Oregon but win the whole ball of wax. And it's been challenging, the two really good teams they've had. So, if I was Oregon, Penn State, the curve, and this was a hypothetical completely, Kirby would move ahead of the other guys because he's proven he can do that, and you don't find guys like that.
It's a great point, and the thing about Kirby is he's not the first nor the last of the Saban disciples who tried to take the Alabama Saban model and implement it when they became a head coach elsewhere. The difference is he's the guy that actually took the baton and carried it somewhere else to virtually the same type of level.
You have to be in a program that's capable of doing that.
Right.
Like outside of Auburn, LSU, Georgia, Alabama, not even Tennessee and Florida, because we saw it at Tennessee, Florida, South Carolina. Maybe I don't even know Texas A&M, Texas, because you to be excellent on to put the monsters together on defense. Those two guys you got to recruit, baby. You got to recruit, and you can't just recruit stars and say. You got to make sure you get the best of the best. And when they do that, defense is a thing of beauty. Would not go look at Jeremy Pruitt at Tennessee, Will Muschamp at South Carolina, and some other people that have tried to kind of replicate Bama elsewhere. So that's it.
You made a very important distinction. There's really a couple different categories of coaches. There's guys that know how to be the CEO of a proven commodity and continue and take it even to the next level. And then there's guys like I'll do another throwback here to Mike Leach. I don't know if Mike Leach fits at Alabama or Georgia or, to your example, Penn State. But what I do know is if you take that next tier program and you put Mike Leach there, you're going to get great results. And that's going to be cemented in his legacy. Mike Leach never had the kind of talent that you do at Georgia, Alabama, Penn State, Ohio State, the normal suspects. But he always got the most out of a given job that he was working under. By the way, there's another bombshell. We'll get into the JC5 momentarily. It is JC and Morgan. Don't forget the website, jcandmorgan.com. You can listen to us, watch us, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Google Play, iTunes, and, of course, Spotify. We are presented in part by Nest and Wild Mattress, nestandwild.com, the most comfortable mattress on the market. It's like sleeping on top of a cloud. Firm edges, tremendous support in all the right places. 5 layers of support, as a matter of fact. Now they've got the bed frames and the most comfortable pillow on the market. Brandon Jameson, the founder and CEO, local business, started in Tupelo, Mississippi, and word is out. That is the place. That is the item that you want. If you want a nice, comfortable sleep each and every night, check out the website, nestandwild.com. This just in from Pete Thamel and Dan Murphy of ESPN. Jaden Rashada, you know the name, former Florida recruit and now current backup Georgia quarterback, is suing Gators coach Billy Napier and a Florida booster for alleged fraud during his recruiting process. Holy smokes, have we ever seen anything like this, JC? I mean, you cover player acquisition as much as anybody. You've done it for a long, long time. This seems to be uncharted waters.
This is like Stupidville. This is like the dude in Boogie Nights where he's like, I'm going to do what I want to do. And he shoots up our boy Ron Jeremy's little abode, right? And just screws the whole deal up, right? This
playing
is that
99 Loft Balloons in the background and Night Ranger.
Motoring,
Cosmo. He likes fireworks.
Look, I mean, I'm like, number one, at some point, Jaden Rashada just needs to go play ball. Changing schools 3 or 4 different times, abandoning teams, going to the team with the brightest shiny lights. That's fine. Maybe he wins the national championship at Georgia. I think Georgia is a place with a lot of structure that they'll process him on out if he doesn't work out. But this is a massive distraction for his career. my question is does this give Florida the Bull Gators down there who are not happy, who are staring, even if they're much better than we anticipate, probably 7-5, 8-4 is the ceiling. Does this give them an opportunity to maybe step in and say, all right, bye. You're a liability. You should have never done this, because it is foolish, that kind of thing.
Right.
But
I think it depends on whether or not they beat Miami week 0.
Well, I'll tell you this. One thing I thought about the other day, you got a guy sitting there that could take the interim job for a year. He's got a year on him. Yeah, shoot, I got a year in me, Mike. I'll go coach the Gators
shoot,
for
no,
1 year.
I can't. No.
I'm telling you, his mind is still sharp. And
I'm not saying he couldn't do it now.
1 year,
I saw Steve as recently as I saw him he's got his own awards banquet every year, and I happened to be in town calling some basketball games on the SEC network, and he was there, so I went. I got the invite, and he's still sharp as a tack. Still sharp as a tack, to the point where he could quote exactly what Billy Napier would need to do to match what he did in 12 years. Something like, have to go 82-5 to match what we did during that time frame.
And now you have helmet communication for quarterbacks, because the problem at South Carolina was he got a little old and couldn't signal them in as like move his, you can't move your hands as, when you get older. But now you got helmet. You got helmet. You can say, R5 43 semi. No. Well, let's go. Larry or whatever. Semi steamers. Let's go steamers.
I don't think you can push out. I don't think you can push out Billy Napier over this.
Over this?
I don't know all the details. Like literally, this is just breaking.
I know.
I don't know.
Basically, Billy Napier and a booster and their director of player personnel, according to the lawsuit, all conspired to offer this guy all this money. Napier was named in the lawsuit to flip him from Miami, who had signed him to a $9 million deal. And this guy, this collective guy, Hathcock, I don't know. It's just he just decided to get out, right? And so it just never.
And again, technically, this is illegal because even though players are being bought everywhere right now.
Well, it's not illegal by the rules. It's a business thing. It's a breach of contract. But
breach of
at the time, or it's misleading or something. Fraud is. They got the word fraud and stuff in here.
I don't know.
But it's like Billy Napier defrauded. Now at the time, head coaches could not sit there and promise $13.85 million. Where'd you get the 8.5 from, by the way? So I just I don't know. I don't know. So we'll dig into all this. Maybe
we'll dig into all that for sure. I just saw it come through. It's definitely worth a mention. I don't know. They're going to parse this out. What is Jaden Rashada's credibility at this point? As you mentioned, he's bounced around from school to school to school. I think right now the bigger issue in Gainesville is, does Billy Napier win some games? I mean, honestly, I think that's going to determine his fate as much as anything. All right, you want to do like part of the JC5 this segment before we break for Vern?
Yeah, let's get a couple. That was actually one. So Phil, go to two. One was the lawsuit. I was going to hit you with it. I didn't know exactly what it had come out. So glad you brought it up, Mike, because you'd have been like, what lawsuit?
Yeah, no, I just saw it on my phone. Just got the update. Phil, can we do the high-end Mr. Announcer?
For the top topics in the sport, we bring the JC5. Number 2.
Boom.
Number 2.
Number 2. All right. So Clemson, much has been made about Clemson's Dabo Sweeney avoiding the portal. He says, we went after some guys, whatever. Same thing every year. And every year I hear from my Clemson people, Dabo's going to get in the portal and rule college football. And it never happens, which to me means, because these are connected people, everybody up there kind of wants him to do it. Can they survive? Dan Wetzel, who we had on this show, has that in his latest podcast. Can they survive without transfers? Can Clemson, and by survive, that program now, the expectations are you're in the playoff.
Yeah. Because Dabo will quickly remind you, as he did at ACC Media Days, well, everybody says we suck, but we'd have won 30 games over the last 3 years. If that's sucking, I guess I'd take it. Clemson fans don't want to hear that. They want to hear – I talk about this all the time, JC. You know this. When a program gets a taste, just a taste, I hate to make an analogy in a dark area that is, say, for example, drugs. But when you get just a taste, you get hooked. And when you get a taste of the good life in college football, where you're playing for championships and winning championships, you can't deal with losing that. The high water mark of every program is what the fan base then wants to expect. I don't know, even if you were heavy in the portal, if Clemson was going to keep up the level that they were keeping up. Remember now, you had 2 generational quarterbacks, Deshaun Watson and Trevor Lawrence, back to back. Okay. If DJ Uiagalelei was ready to be that kind of player, this might not even be a conversation. But he looked like he saw a ghost when he got out on the field in big-time college football at Clemson. Now, he had a redemption at Oregon State. We'll see if that redemption continues in Tallahassee. But my point is that who's to say, even if Clemson does go wild in the portal, which they're not under Dabo, that they're ever going to be at that level? Who's to say Deshaun Watson and Trevor Lawrence are coming back through that door, or all those incredible defensive linemen are coming back through that door, portal or otherwise? That being said, I think Dabo is – look, he's got blank U money and he's got some blank U cred where – what are you going to do, fire him if you're Clemson? Do you remember what you were before Dabo? So he's kind of saying, I don't care what you think. My resume is right there. I'm going to do it my way. But I'm telling you, if they have what they consider to be a setback this year, I just wonder how much that fury is going to come in. And it's not just the Clemson fans. It is this – we talk about the national media and their coverage of the sport, JC, and who's actually covering it these days. These are people that already have a preconditioned commentary on how college football is bad. The whole thing is anti-student athlete. The whole thing is just a bunch of greedy people treating it. And they look at Dabo as, oh, he's a guy who wants it the old way.
Poster child.
Yeah, he's a poster child for a guy who wants to not have the progress that we've had for student-athlete compensation, which is not at all what Dabo is saying, right? Like this, it's a stupid pretense, but he's now become their guy. He's become their whipping boy. He's become their piñata. Yeah, so they're rooting against him. There's no doubt. And he also wears his faith on his sleeve. That's another strike two.
Yeah, you can't do that.
Can't do that. So they are ready at any given moment to just take out the torpedoes and crucify him. But he doesn't care. He doesn't care. It's a long way of saying I don't know. I mean, still going to depend on, is Klubnik ready? When are they going to get back to having NFL capable wide receivers? When are they going to have a more dominating defense? That to me is going to be bigger. But yeah, I think it's a weird hill to die on. I am not going to go in the portal like everybody else is going in it. I don't totally understand it, but he's not. If you listen to him just a week ago at ACC Media Days, he is not backing down 1 ounce.
They have some good young talent at receiver. They brought
Number
him in
3.
their freshman, and I'll get to number 3 in a second. Offensively, I don't know how much better they're going to be, and they weren't that good last year. Defensively, they're going to be elite. There is a reason Georgia's a 12.5-point favorite for that opener, though, and that point spread could climb quite a bit. All right, Mike, give me one team program in the Big Ten, not the newcomers, not Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan. One program in the Big Ten that's kind of like, that you feel like could be on the rise at some point. That's maybe not lately been doing what you expect. Who should have higher expectations in that middle part of the Big Ten? That's kind of a weird question. Wisconsin.
But yeah. What I mean, Wisconsin is set up to be, I don't want to say elite, but they're certainly set up to be better than they have been the last couple of years. They kind of lost their mojo a little bit, and then they bring in a guy in Longo who wants to completely change the image of Wisconsin football, 3 yards in a cloud of dust. But Wisconsin should be very good. Camp Randall, an outstanding place. Fan base, outstanding. As you know, on the recruiting trail, they have to be a little creative. They don't have a ton of the kind of talent that and they can't do an Ohio State and just like go into South Florida and pluck a 5-star. That's not Wisconsin recruiting. But Wisconsin should be back to where I think they should be, back to where at least they were a few years ago, where, you didn't put them quite in Ohio State's class or Michigan when they were really good under Harbaugh, but they should be really close. So I'll go Wisconsin on that. I mean, I think of those other programs, like Minnesota peaked a little bit with Fleck, and Illinois peaked a little bit with Bielema, Northwestern but I think for the most part, those programs don't have the DNA to do what you're talking about. I think Wisconsin does.
As long as Northwestern continues to contend for divisions, which now there are no more divisions, but as long as Northwestern keeps winning, that says a lot about that soft underbelly of the Big Ten, because all those other schools you mentioned are set up to win, with the exception of Indiana. They're set up to be really good. I'm with you. Look, Wisconsin's a good enough job. Luke Fickell, who could have, everybody expected him to be at Ohio State or Michigan, took it. So that's the deal there. Since we have Vern on today, and this is interesting, what do you make of the ABC SEC kind of package that they've thrown out so far? And I know we're all going to miss CBS, but kind of what do you make of that 3:30 time spot? And is it going to be the same as it was with all the primetime games and all that, just from a consumer standpoint? Well, you're a TV guy, so let me know.
I'll just say this, then we got to take a break, and we'll welcome in our distinguished guest, Vern Lundquist. I think the biggest difference could be we've been conditioned to the biggest game of the week is 3:30. With ESPN controlling every time slot now in the SEC, that could change. You could easily say this game is so big, we want it in prime time. And I'm not a ratings expert, but I do know that prime time generally can give you some better numbers depending what you're opposed against. So I think that'll be there's always been a luster under the previous package that, it's 3:30, it's the marquee game. Well, that's not necessarily going to be. It might still be, but there might be some weeks where they do the calculations in Bristol and say, no, this one's going to be 8:00 Eastern time. Mm-hmm. And so all of a sudden now you'll still have a good game at 3:30. I mean, let's say it's the second best game in the SEC. That's usually a pretty good game, but it might not be the biggest game. I mean, other than that, the music's going to change, the announcers are going to change, but the quality product on the field, that is going to be the same. We know it hasn't been the same since Vern left, and we're going to talk to the legendary Hall of Fame announcer when we come back. It is JC and Morgan.
Listen up. This is for construction professionals, contractors, facility managers, or do-it-yourself homeowners. SitePro Rentals is ready to equip your upcoming project. We rent construction equipment for any size job. Boom and scissor lifts, telehandlers, skid steers, excavators, air compressors, generators, even small tools and equipment. SitePro has you covered. If you are ready for better equipment rental, call SitePro and rent from the local, friendly, easy to do business with equipment professionals. Call 972-RENT-NOW. That's 972-736-8669 to rent the newest equipment in the Atlanta market. Call 972-RENT-NOW or visit SiteProRentals.com.
We're passionate about making sure that the Nest and Wild mattress is the best it can be. Made well and made right. Right here in Tupelo, Mississippi. So how can we do all that? Work. Hard work. And that means something. The Nest and Wild mattress is a movement. It's a pride in where you come from and where you're going. So get comfortable, because this movement is just beginning.
All right, we are back. Mike Morgan, JC Sherbert here on JC and Morgan. We'll get back to some of the stories of the day in college football in our final segment. But as we've discussed during the offseason, we're pretty guest heavy, and we've had the great fortune of having so many distinguished voices, whether it's announcers or people that just cover the great sport of football. And this one ranks at the very top. He's on the Mount Rushmore, no matter how you want to define it. Vern Lundquist, we don't have enough time to get into your entire biography, sir, because there's just so much there. I mean, it almost snuck up on me. I did tell the story that you and I met when you were inducted into the NSMA Broadcasting Hall of Fame back in 2007. I was a statewide winner, and I remember sitting down at a table one-on-one and just getting to talk with you, and you were so great in your words, and have been managed to stay in touch a little bit since. So let me first start off by saying thank you for that back when I was younger and very inspired by your words. Thank you for all that you've done, and so much thanks goes to you for taking out the time today. Appreciate it.
Mike, we were both younger back then. Considerably. Yes, I do remember that conversation. And that was a great honor. I guess the organization has now moved from Catawba College to Wake Forest. Is that correct?
Yeah. We used to go when the winners would stay at a Holiday Inn in Salisbury, North Carolina.
Right.
I remember it very well. You had your Chili's and your Applebee's, and those were your eating options. But we'd play golf. It was 3 days, 2 nights, and we'd all get to collaborate and hang out with people like yourself and Jim Nantz and Joe Buck, the national winners. And it was the ultimate honor, and it was so well done by the people that organized that. But yes, they have moved it ever since. Let me just do this. Indulge me, if you will. And I'm not going to do this justice because these are just some of your infamous calls. Okay. I've mentioned my introduction to football in any form, and I wish college football had an NFL Films, but it was NFL Films. Like, as a kid, I knew I wanted to get into broadcasting and sportscasting in particular, and I'd come home from school, and rather than Scooby-Doo and the Flintstones, I would watch. ESPN didn't have a lot of programming at that time. They had NFL Films, and I remember, as someone who also enjoyed watching the Cowboys in my youth, but this game happened before I was old enough to understand it, but they played the Super Bowl 13 call. You were the voice of the Dallas Cowboys, for those that don't know. They had a tight end, a very good tight end by the name of Jackie Smith. And in a key moment against the Steelers and a perfectly thrown ball by Staubach in the end zone, Jackie just flat out dropped it. And you said, and they played this on the show, bless his heart, he's got to be the sickest man in America. I thought to myself, that has got to be the best way to describe that call, and one of the best calls I've still ever heard today. That was in 1979. Do you remember that call very well?
Oh, kind of. Yes, I do. And there's a background to why I said what I said. There are many iterations of that play, but let's go back to the reason I was so empathetic in that case. We had just developed the ability to go live remotely back then in '79. It was an innovative thing, and so I was working. In addition to doing the Cowboys, I was the sports anchor at the ABC affiliate in Dallas, WFAA TV, and we went live from Fort Lauderdale, the Galt Ocean Mile Hotel, I think it was. Anyway. And I had Jackie Smith and his wife as my guest on the telecast at 10, I don't know, or on a Wednesday night at 10:25. And he had come to the Cowboys his first year, Hall of Famer with the St. Louis Cardinals. This was his last season, and he had announced that. And I asked Jackie on that telecast, how would you like to be remembered? And he said, with a meaningful catch in a Cowboy victory. Oh. So that was going through my mind. And the other part of that play that is intriguing is that they had practiced it all week long from the 5-yard line in. In this case, the ball was at the 11-yard line. So when Landry sent the play in, Roger Staubach looked at Tom and said, no, no. And Landry just glared at him and pointed the finger and said, run the play. So Roger will tell you that in trying to guide the ball, because Jackie was so wide open, he took a little bit off. And instead of drilling it, he kind of squeezed it in there. And the timing was just a fraction disrupted. That's what we had. And it gets replayed all the time. And
all the time.
Yeah, it does.
Because you nailed the emotion of the moment. And that, when I think of what makes you the Hall of Famer that you are, it's the economy of words, and it is the nailing of the emotion of the moment. Whether it was SEC football, which we'll get to, the Masters for 40 years, voice of the Dallas Cowboys, that was all in that one call to me. Just, I know you weren't thinking that heavily about it because as a play-by-play guy, we just have to. Everything is spontaneous.
Sure.
But you had to feel good about the call, even though the moment, because if you're the voice of a team like you were, you're feeling some of that pain. And obviously you knew Jackie, as you mentioned. I just thought that nailed it. Let me mention a few more. And again, I'm not going to do this justice. April 13th, 1986. We have a lot of golf fans. I mean, people that love football also seem to love golf. This is the 50th Masters, 1986. Nicklaus makes the birdie putt on the 17th of the outright lead. The call, 3 words. Maybe? Yes, sir. Right? 1992. I remember where I was watching this when you called Leitner hitting the shot against Duke. There's the pass to Leitner. Puts it up. Yes! Used to play that call on my talk shows back in the day. April 10th, 2005, Tiger Woods sinks a dramatic chip and birdie on the 16th hole. Here it comes. Oh my goodness. Oh wow. In your life, have you seen anything like that? November 10th, 2012. This is Alabama, Texas A&M. A young man by the name of Johnny Manziel throws a touchdown pass after nearly getting sacked and fumbling the football. The call, snap from Patrick Lewis, 4-man Alabama rush. Got him? No, they didn't. Oh, my gracious. How about that? 2 more. Just bear with me here. Then in 2013, this is Georgia-Auburn, top 25 matchup, CBS, game of the week, 3:30. Again, many of us remember where we were when we were watching the play. The Hail Mary pass. The call from Verne. 4th and 18. Lets it go. Oh, my gosh. Oh, my gosh. Oh, no. Ricardo Lewis. Talk about a Hail Mary. And then the kick 6, which has to be, if you think of the top 10 plays in the history of the sport, this one is going to be up there for sure. November 30th. You folks know it. 2013. Iron Bowl. As the field goal is lined up. The call from Verne. On the way, no. Returned by Chris Davis. Davis goes left. Davis gets a block. Davis has another block. Chris Davis, no flags. Touchdown Auburn, an answered prayer. Again, I'm not doing that justice, but I had to read it with a little inflection just to kind of give the people an idea of how big those moments were. And you were on all of them, and I could name 100 more, but is there anything there, the ones I just went over, that stands out?
Yes, he probably replied.
Wow.
I don't even know if it's fair to ask you to pick a couple because they're all so iconic.
You know, Mike, if you practice this craft, you go to an event and you hope something memorable breaks out in front of you, and then you pray that you're capable of verbally accenting that moment. And in my case, I've been blessed that so many times something memorable has broken out, and more times than not, I've been up to the task of underlining the moment and I think that the key, in my view, is an economy of words. Be succinct. I learned that from a golf broadcaster when I first started at Augusta in 1983. Our executive producer was Frank Chirkinian. We called him the Ayatollah, partly out of respect, but mostly out of fear. And I will add parenthetically, he was the single most profane human being I've ever known in my life.
Jeez.
But he taught me a lot. And one thing was, there were various lessons. But the key was keep it simple and get out of the way, and use an economy of words. Don't catch verbal diarrhea. Just shut up. I mean, memorably, the first occasion I ever worked with Frank was a golf tournament in 1983, the Phoenix Open, and that was I had done some golf when I was at ABC. I was at ABC 74 to 82 with while doing the Cowboys and then the weekend. The Monday through Friday sports anchoring. But I got an opportunity to go to CBS. I got an opportunity because I got those dreaded words from Chuck Howard at ABC. We're moving in a different direction. We ain't renewing your contract. And that was in 1982. It's a long, complicated story, but I got a shot to go to CBS. And part of it was golf. And Frank taught me, be succinct. We've got 65 of the best technical and production people in the world who are working this event. They'll document visually and orally. You punctuate and keep it as simple as you can. And I sometimes listen to guys now who they think the world was created for them to go at a run-on sentence. Mm-hmm. And too many of them just lay out. Let the movement breathe. And it's good advice, I think. Even I'm 83. I get a number of calls from young men in their late 20s, early 30s. What advice would you give? Find a variety of adjectives, keep it simple, and get out of the way. And I'm smiling to myself because I remember that kick six call when I did say no flags. There was that fraction of a moment after he scored when I looked back and I thought, dear God, don't let there be any flags.
Yeah.
So true. So true. Thankfully, there was not.
Yeah.
Even today, when I rewatch that, I kind of think, really? And I glanced down at the field to kind of confirm because it was just a split second there. So I definitely get that. Vern, they've got a sequel coming out to Happy Gilmore. And I know you were the star of that classic comedy. Describe that experience working with Sandler and all those guys. That's a movie that's near and dear to my heart. And your thoughts on the sequel and sort of, was that fun for a guy like you, kind of being in the movie set? I mean, did you meet Bob Barker? I mean, is there? That experience intrigues me as someone that's in sports and also loves movies and has done a little amateur acting. That I figured I'd ask you about that.
Sure, JC. We shot that movie in 1996, And I got a call from my agent, a guy named Bob Rosen, I've had since the early 80s. And he said, there's a part, a small part in a film that they're shooting in Vancouver, British Columbia. And I've recommended you for the part. So get on a plane tomorrow or next week and then fly to Vancouver. And we shot everything in which I was involved in one day, one full day. And Adam Sandler was still there. I got to see him shoot one scene. And the intriguing thing to me about it is that when we met that morning at 7:00, there was a circle around. Dennis Dugan was the director. He also was an actor, and he played the PGA commissioner in the movie. And so Dennis said, "I've got an idea. Let's have an inside joke. Let's do something just for us." And he looked at this really handsome guy standing on the periphery of the circle. His name was Jack Jarapudo. And he said, "Jack, go over to makeup and costume and have them give you a coat and tie. And I want you to sit next to Vern in every scene, but you cannot say a word because you're not a member of the Screen Actors Guild." So the guy sitting to my left is Jack Jarapudo, and he just nods. And he's a screen stealer because he's such a handsome guy. Well, it turned out he was Adam Sandler's roommate at New York University's film school. And he was there just to, lend his roommate some support. Well, now if you watch Adam Sandler's latest films, Jack Jarapudo is the executive producer on all of them. So he used that little on-camera time very well. And
no doubt.
Yeah.
that's something we didn't know.
Gilmore too, and I'm just distressed because I haven't gotten a call.
Oh,
I guess they moved on with their lives.
do you still have your SAG card? Is that what's holding up this?
I do. I still pay my dues.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll see if we can make a few phone calls and make that happen. Vern.
I'd like that.
That would be an injustice.
That darn movie, it caught on, and USA Cable or one of the cable outfits replays it, and it's the wonderful thing for me is that it's connected. It's given me a connection across two generations, and I'll give you one quick anecdote about that. Billy Packer and I were doing a North Carolina at Arizona game in Tucson, and it was a made-for-television event. And North Carolina had a really good team, and Lute Olson was the head coach. Roy Williams was the coach at North Carolina, and Lute Olson at Arizona. And so we were sitting halfway up in the stands because Roy Williams didn't want any of us down close because he used profane language quite liberally, and we didn't want. So we were halfway up in the stand, and when they were doing stretching exercises after practice had ended, and this tall, lanky red shirt came galloping up the steps and leaned into 6 or 7 of us were sitting there, and he said, "Mr. Lundquist, the team would like you to talk to him now." And I said, "You mean Billy Packer?" "No, they want you." And I said, "Holy cow." So I followed him back down, and the 12 guys were all on the floor stretching, post-practice stretching exercise. And Tyler Hansborough was right below me, their All-American center. And I said, "Fellas, what can I do for you?" And he looked up at me and said, "Give us the line from Happy Gilmore." So I just cupped my hand. I said, "Who the hell is Happy Gilmore?" And they laughed. By the way, that one scene, I don't know why it resonated, but it did. And my wife Nancy and I were invited to the world premiere. That's where I met Bob Barker. I didn't meet him at the set in Vancouver, but it was a big deal. I mean, they had a red carpet and all that kind of stuff. But it's kept me in touch with two generations now, because these kids could be my grandchildren who are playing, and I get it a lot. Who the hell is Happy Gilmore? Not so parenthetically, after the issues of the golf tournament, the PGA Championship last week, a screensaver appeared, and it's me with Jack Jaraputo. My hand is over my microphone, and the tagline is, "Who the hell is Scotty Scheffler?"
Fantastic. Yeah, it's funny. I think Bob Barker probably, for a new generation, that's how they remembered him over Price is Right. You know, the power of a popular movie, a cult flick like that, for sure. I want to go. You shared something with me that I didn't know until, again, that fateful conversation back in 2007 when you were inducted into the Hall of Fame. And you had already been on the job calling the SEC Game of the Week for about, at that point, 6-7 years. And I think I asked you, well, you know, how did that come to fruition? And you told the story. It certainly was not something that, you know, you were striving for. You already had an NFL gig. And as much as we love college football, there is a certain status that comes along with being an NFL announcer that people don't typically leave that for anything else. So share with the folks how you kind of the awkward path to being the signature voice of SEC football for nearly 2 decades, and how you grew into that role as someone, again, that really had you didn't have deep ties to the SEC.
Well, I was doing the NFL at the time. This was in 1999. And I was the number 2 guy working with Dan Deerdorf. And believe me, life in the NFL is really nice. There are a lot of nonstop flights and fine hotels. And we live most of the year. I'm in Austin, Texas right now. We have a condo here. But in 10 days, we'll go back to our full-time home in Steamboat Springs, Colorado, and we'll be back there till October. And so we're in Steamboat Springs, and we have a commuter flight to Denver, and then you get to go wherever you go. But so I'm very comfortable. And I got a call from Lance Barrow. I'm going to back up to, in the history of CBS Golf, since 1956, there have been 3 executive producers: Frank Chirkinian, Lance Barrow, and now Rashada IV. And Lance was at a meeting at Augusta, and he called me. I was doing the NFL with him, and he said, there are rumors about CBS hiring Dick Enberg, who was then, Hall of Famer at NBC. And I wanted to give you a heads up because it might affect you. And I thought, well, can't imagine it would affect me. Why would it? And then Pat Hayden, who later became a partner of mine, or was a former partner. Pat was doing NBC Notre Dame games with Dick. And I saw Pat, and he said, just want you to know he's really unhappy. He and Bob Costas were rivals at NBC. And Dick harbored some resentment about what he perceived to be favored son treatment of Bob Costas. So I got concerned enough about these rumors that I called Sean McManus, my boss, who not so parenthetically, incidentally rather, was Jim McKay's son. And Jim McKay is the greatest storyteller we've ever had in this craft. But I called Sean, and I said, we were in the kitchen of our home in Colorado, and Nancy was in the kitchen doing something while I was on the phone with Sean McManus. And I said, I want to call you about these rumors I keep hearing about Dick Enberg. And Sean said what he should say as a boss, the appropriate thing, kind of like arm's length. And he said, I can't imagine he's such a high-profile guy and such a high-salary guy. I don't think we could ever meet his salary demands. And then there's a pause. He said, now, in the unlikely event that we were to hire Dick Enberg, how would you feel about becoming the new voice of the SEC on CBS? And I said the appropriate things back to him because I didn't want to do it. But he said, oh, okay, I'll keep that in mind. Hung up the phone. I looked at Nancy and I said, honey, pack your bags for Tuscaloosa.
You knew.
That was my inauguration. The first game ever. I worked with Todd Blackledge for 6 years and then Gary Danielson for 11. My first game ever was with Todd, and it was Florida at Tennessee, end of September afternoon, and Neyland Stadium, 107th. And I had never been to that facility. And Jesse Palmer, who is now ubiquitous, won The Bachelor, and he's doing all kinds of stuff on television. He was the quarterback at Florida. He threw a touchdown pass that was or was not complete with 10 seconds to go. And the line judge quickly signaled touchdown. And Florida won 2019, I think was the final. And we got off the air, and I looked at Todd, and I said, are they all like this? And he said, enough of them. And they were. And it became the greatest assignment. I'd never been the lead guy on anything at all. I've always was a number two guy. And to work with Todd and then with Gary and a series of our first sideline reporter was Jill Arrington, who lives in California now. Then we had Tracy Wolfson, and then we had Allie LaForce. I mean, how blessed was I
Strong
to work with those folks. And Allie is doing NBA now on TNT. We're still great friends. I heard from her last week. Her husband, Joe Smith, was a major league relief pitcher for 13 years. They have a small son, 2 years old, Jacob. Tracy, of course, is going on with Nance and Romo, and she works with Iron Eagle and Raftery and Gail Hill on the NBA. She lives with her husband, Dave, who's a Wall Street guy in Tenafly, New Jersey. And she is just the best. Well, and Allie, I mean, all of them. So I had two great guys sitting by my side, and then three really wonderful women working as sideline reporters. And it was just the greatest assignment a guy could ever ask for.
I think that's certainly the case now. People realize the prestige that comes with that package, and you're forever going to be synonymous with it. I'm just curious. I mean, you talk about a indoctrination, a baptism of fire by any measure, to get called right into a controversial call at the end of a rivalry. Back then, Florida and Tennessee were both near the top of their game, and as you mentioned, 107,000 fans. And you know, when we get the question from people from other parts of the country, which obviously I know you spent a great deal of time in Dallas. That's now part of the SEC, but back then wasn't necessarily. Is it, forget about the talent and the championships, because obviously, you know, you coincided with the eventual run where the SEC just was gobbling up national championships seemingly on a yearly basis. But even before then, would you tell people in the business or just common fans about, here's why SEC football is different? It all starts with the venue. It all starts with the environment. It all starts with the fans, because great players and coaches come and go, but that is unparalleled when it comes to SEC football.
I would agree. I mean, I was never, ever a Southern guy. It was the farthest thing. You know, I spent the first 12 years of my life, really, in Everett, Washington. My dad was a Lutheran minister, and he was ordained from the Lutheran School of Theology in Rock Island, Illinois. I was born in Minnesota, but lived there for 2 months. Anyway, my first real memories were from the Pacific Northwest, and then we moved to Austin when I was 12 years old. So I've always considered myself essentially a Texan who ultimately moved to Colorado. But the reason we have a place in Austin is I got my first job here a mere 61 years ago, and spent 3 years at the television station owned by President Johnson and his wife, and then through a series of good fortune, lucky moves, I got the job in Dallas. And the best thing that ever happened to me professionally was getting the Cowboy radio job. I mean, that just kind of led to everything else. But I had no interest really in the SEC. And then all of a sudden I was involved in it deeply. And I learned about the passion of people, not just Auburn and Alabama, but Georgia and indeed Tennessee, LSU, loudest stadium in captivity. And LSU, the folks at LSU used to hate it when we would select one of their games for a 3:30 time slot because we cut into their drinking time.
Oh yeah, they don't like that.
So true.
Yeah, but you know those venues, and I love Georgia. Now if I'm my arms are placed behind my back and said, okay, here's the blindfold. Tell us before we leave, what's your favorite venue? I think it would be the University of Georgia. I love Athens as a college town. I'm a big fan of on-campus stadiums.
Yeah.
And Sanford Stadium sits right in a bowl. And I've gotten to know so many people at Georgia. But how lucky in my life have I been? I get to call Nick Saban not only a colleague, but a friend. And I know Kirby Smart quite well. And these are, you want the creme de la creme of college coaches. You could do worse than those two guys. And so the SEC will always be uppermost in my mind. By far the most significant assignment I ever got in all these years of doing this. And
that's an incredibly strong statement.
After 10 years, my boss, Sean McManus, we were at Augusta. And here we are living in Steamboat Springs. So here, honest to God, a typical week. On Thursday, Steamboat to Denver, Denver to Atlanta, Atlanta to wherever. And Chris Fowler, who's a good friend, said the three most dreaded words in air travel are Atlanta, Delta, connection.
As a longtime Atlanta resident, I totally can commiserate with you and everybody else on that.
Yeah, but Sean asked me after 10 years, would your life be any easier if we gave you a corporate apartment in Atlanta? So for 7 years, Nancy and I would relocate, lock, stock, and barrel, and we stayed at the Post-Alexander Apartments out on Buckhead, right across from Ritz-Carlton. And across.
No kidding. I did not know that.
Yeah. And we were in a different apartment every year, but we would move down in September and not come home until December. And we grew to love Atlanta. Wasn't too fond of the traffic.
Yeah, nobody is.
Yeah, no. But that's a MARTA, right? You could have ridden the MARTA to the Dome to call the championship game from that spot.
I don't know. If
I wouldn't recommend it.
MARTA. That would not be smarta.
Security, but yeah, that's a very nice place.
Yeah,
Vern, we have a lot of ties to South Carolina, big South Carolina audience. You called two of the most iconic moments in South Carolina athletics history recently: Madison Square Garden in 2017 when they beat Florida to go to the Final Four, and then the win over Alabama at Williams-Brice. What were your thoughts about the venue in Columbia and, that day at Madison Square Garden where I remember you famously opened the broadcast that says, "Welcome to the SEC on CBS."
Yeah, I did. It struck me. I mean, that was the last college basketball game I ever got to call. And I worked with Jim Spinarkle, who's a wonderful guy. I did 15 years with Raftery. but Raftery had gotten too big for his britches, and he got promoted. And so, but Jim Spinarkle is a wonderful guy. He's another Wall Street guy, lives in New Jersey, and Jimmy and I we had Florida, South Carolina, and it's just, I remember coming on the air and I said, I never thought I'd ever say these words again, but welcome to the SEC on CBS. And it seemed appropriate. And how blessed is a guy who loves the craft that he's involved in to get to call his final basketball game at Madison Square Garden. I mean, the stars were aligned. And so it was, and Jimmy's a great guy. Raft and I are still, Billy probably is the closest friend I've made in all the sports that I've done over the years. We still communicate every once in a while. He's one of my favorite characters in all of broadcasting. He has never, ever heard a last call, which he would honor. His tagline, when they put him in the ground, the stone is going to say, just one more.
One more.
And he's got that brevity too. He's succinct, like with his color analysis. I like that about him as well. I mean, it's just a couple of words, but they hit, So yeah, that was a Raftery. You can't go wrong with him as college basketball goes.
I think Ian Eagle is one of my favorite guys too, and the combination of Ian in his first year of doing March with Bill and with Grant Hill, I think Ian was able to get Grant to come out of himself a little bit and loosen up. And Raftery doesn't need any loosening; he needs some tightening. But the combination of, I think Ian's nickname is Bird, right? Eagle, Bird, and I heard him say it during maybe the semifinals. Raftery finally called him Ian, and Ian said on the air, he said, "Well, I must have grown in your eyes because now I'm no longer Bird, I'm Ian." But I thought the three of them were just outstanding. And Ian Eagle was one of the brightest, most descriptive guys I've ever met. And so that's a really good team.
And great chemistry, which you can't fake. It's got to be authentic. And of course, you had it. I want to ask one more of the SEC on CBS question, and then I'll make a final pivot. You mentioned some of the coaches that obviously stand out. I mean, you covered the GOAT, Nick Saban, during so many great moments. That one obviously stands out for a number of reasons. And as I've said many times on this show, for those that have never met Nick, you might have this image of him being this, grouchy guy, but that if you meet with him on a professional basis, and you probably on a personal basis as well, he's actually funny. He's engaging. He's a delight to be around. I know that's hard for a lot of people to believe. But what about some players that stand out? I mean, we talked about some of the moments. Is there one or two players that were your favorite to cover in those 17 or so years?
And almost immediately the guy who comes right to the top is Tim Tebow. Mm-hmm. I first met when he was on a recruiting visit to Alabama. And I was introduced to him. We were at some outdoor restaurant in the fall, and he had visited Alabama, but he grew up not far from Florida, and he's a guy that is very devout, and his faith is very important to him, and he expresses that. I remember he had a sister who was a missionary in Bangladesh. And the first time I ever heard of Sling TV, Tim told me that his sister in Bangladesh was using this device so she could watch his football games. And I remember Gary Daniels and I got to know, I did 23 Tim Tebow games while he was in Florida.
Wow.
And he's about as competitive as any athlete, not the most gifted, unfortunately. And I'll tell you a little anecdote. We were watching video of him. He had a problem with his left foot and how he took a stance. And Gary spotted it in some 8th grade video film of Tim, and the way he dropped the ball to throw it. But competitive, my Lord, I've never seen anything like the guy. And he would compete and he tried to make it in baseball, and he's the most competitive athlete I've ever known. Not the most gifted, but he's one of my all-time favorites. And I'm trying to think gosh almighty, I got to know Reggie White when he played.
Oh gosh,
and a wonderful guy.
If people only knew how good he was, there's a
yeah.
whole generation of people that don't understand.
You're
that
right.
name gets lost in translation.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Anybody else come to mind?
I mean, you got to cover so many great quarterbacks is the position that first pops to mind. I mean, I mentioned the Manziel highlight. Obviously, off the field, he had his own issues, but on the field, electric.
Yeah, he really was.
You know.
And he was a shooting star, wasn't he? And
no question.
Yeah.
No question. I got to ask you about this. You mentioned this again, going back to some of our conversations in the past. There is another generation, as you spanned a few of them, that still remember you most for Bowling for Dollars. Now, I was just a kid when this show was on the air, but I know I have family that watched it, that swore by it. I know it was a phenomenon. Tell the folks how you wound up in that gauntlet.
I remember the show. Mike doesn't remember. I remember hearing the promos for Bowling for Dollars.
Well,
before the Flintstones or something.
And it was seen in. I know in Dallas it was called Bowling for Dollars. In Boston it was called Candle Pins for Cash, and
Nice.
It was owned by a company called Clasher Productions. Their other franchise was Romper Room.
I remember.
To give you some context.
Well, there you go.
I was working at Channel 8, WFAA in Dallas, and I got called in. And Newton Minow at the time, this was mid-'70s, Newton Minow was the FCC commissioner, and he would refer to this 6:30 to 7 time slot as a vast wasteland. And so people were franchising things to put 6:30 to 7. And I got called into my boss's office, and I was told, we've agreed to buy this program called Bowling for Dollars, and you're going to be the host. And I said, not on your life. I'm a sports anchor. I am not a game show host. And my boss said, you might want to read your contract. And so he said, we knew you were going to say that. So here's the phone number. He's expecting your call. And it was the name of Chick Hearn, who was the voice of the Los Angeles Lakers.
Sure.
And he was the host of Bowling for Dollars in Los Angeles. And they said, call him, ask him his advice. So I did. And Mr. Hearn, who had done, I think before he finished, he wound up doing 3,575 Laker broadcasts. But he hosted this show. It was on the independent station, Channel 5 in LA, 7 to 7. And he was very gracious. He took the call, and I said, he explained the format. You tape 6 shows every Monday, so you could take a week off at the end of a month. And it's a half an hour, 6 guests. And I said, well, how does it do in the ratings? He said, oh, my God, we're an independent station. We kill Huntley Brinkley on NBC. And Walter Cronkite can't hold a candle to us. And he said, well, so, on and on. And then I got a little uppity. And I said, well, Mr. Hearn, you're the voice of the Los Angeles Lakers. I just started the Dallas Cowboys. How about your image? And he said, listen to me and listen to me closely. Do the show take the money they're going to pay you, put a pool in your backyard, and move on with your life.
Woo, sounds good. I love it.
So
I tell you what,
did exactly that. And in the midst of this run, I got assigned to my first ever national football telecast at ABC. It was for a kid who grew up in Texas. It could not have been more perfect. It was Texas, University of Texas at Texas A&M on Thanksgiving Friday in 1975. My partner was Frank Broyles, the head coach and athletic director at the University of Arkansas. So we did the telecast, and it went pretty well. And my best friend was my spotter. He's passed on now, but his name was Joe Cash. And so we were driving back to have a Friday night Thanksgiving dinner with our wives in Dallas. And Joe was driving, and I was all pumped up, and I'm going on. I mean, I was taking narcissism to a new level. Joe, can you imagine Portland, Oregon to Portland, Maine? They were all watching the game today, on and on and on and on. Yeah. So we pulled into a gas station in Fairfield, Texas. And these were the days when they still did full service. So Joe gets out to go in and use the facilities, and I'm sitting in the car, and the guy comes out, checks the tires, opens the hood, checks the radiator, lowers the hood, and now he starts to wipe the windshield. And I could tell there was a hint of recognition in his eyes. And I thought, well, he's going to say something nice about the telecast today. He probably was an Aggie, really enjoyed the A&M win. He kept rubbing the windshield, and I look at this, that old mustard yellow ABC jacket. I still had it on. Finally, he turned back and he said, Rudy, God Almighty, get out here. It's that bowling for dollars dude on the TV.
Bowling for dollars.
of course, that would rank at the very top of the pyramid of your illustrious career, right?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. You've mentioned a couple of things that I think can apply to anybody, not just in broadcasting, but in life. First off, there's never been a broadcaster, I don't care how good or how illustrious, that hasn't had a bad moment or two on air and hasn't had a setback in their career. And that applies to any vocation, any career. Were there ever any moments, either early on or even later on, where you said, I don't know if I'm cut out for this. I don't know if I want to keep doing this anymore?
Yeah, there were. As I said, I started here. A legendary guy named Cactus Pryor, long gone now, but he hired me. My first job was a summer replacement announcer in FM radio. And I was here in Austin for 3 years, and I thought I want to do something legitimate with my life. So I resigned. I took a job at San Antonio, where I anchored the 6 and 10 news for 1 year at the NBC affiliate in San Antonio. And the market in San Antonio was not the most sophisticated in the world. And it was the head of, if it bleeds, it leads, that kind of stuff. And the ABC affiliate was number one in the market. And they were patrons of that art. So we tried to, and I grew disgusted with the quality of our newscast and realized that I missed sports broadcasting and the kind of freedom you had to be your own boss, in a sense. So I applied for a job in Dallas, and I was turned down twice. And finally, I gave it a go, and I sucked it up. And the guy who beat me out the second time was a competitor of mine. His name was Dave Lane. And Dave was the sports anchor at KCN in Temple when I had been in Austin, and we knew each other quite well. He got the job as sports director at Channel 8 in Dallas. Big. It was a top 10 market even back then in 67. And he called me. We were friends, and he called me and he said, Jeannie and I are expecting our first child, and I am not going to be an absent parent. I don't want, so I'm going into sales. And he recommended me for the job, and so that's how I got the position. I succeeded Dave, and ultimately he became so successful in sales that he became my boss.
Wow.
And we lost him at a very young age. He's 51. He had a brain tumor, but his graciousness in recommending me opened the whole world for me. And it was shortly after I got the job in Dallas that I was invited to go on a Cowboy charter to Washington, D.C. These were the days of the Redskins and the Cowboys, Landry and George Allen. And then I was asked en route, would you do the pregame and the postgame for a radio network? And I thought, sure. And the fellow who was the play-by-play announcer then is a guy named Bill Mercer, who was 98 years old and still living, widow, in retirement, but we're still close. And the Cowboy thing, I'm getting long-winded and can't remember how I started this.
Oh, that's great.
The end of the only joke, but the Cowboy job led to everything else. And I mean, I did the pre and post game that whole year, and wound up on the Cowboy charter going to Green Bay, Wisconsin. And I was there for the Ice Bowl, but still one of the famous games ever. And I remember I was pre and post game, right? So I had nothing to do. I remember the wake up. We were at the Northland Hotel in Green Bay, and the Sunday morning, and on the Friday, I'd gone on the Cowboy charter as the radio host, and I had arranged with Chuck Lane, the PR director of the Packers, to do an interview with Vince Lombardi, and I had a photographer along, a guy named Jack Murray, and you can't imagine how simple things were back then. There was no mass media circus. It was Lombardi meeting with 8 members of the Dallas press on Friday afternoon. And I had arranged with Coach Lombardi to do an interview down in the field. So the meeting broke up, and Lombardi got up and excused himself. And I looked at the PR guy and said, Chuck, help me. My photographer's down there. We're expecting to do Lombardi, and you had told me it was set up. So he got Lombardi to come back in. Lombardi said, I don't do television without a coat and tie. And I said, Coach, if it'll make you feel better, I'll take my coat and tie off. And he reluctantly finally said, okay. So the two of us take the elevator down. We walk out, and Jack Murray was filmed, no videotape. And Jack Murray started the camera. The topic of our 5-minute conversation was the electric grid that had been placed under Lambeau so that the field would never freeze. That film aired, that snippet, on Saturday night in Dallas. Well, Sunday morning, I get a call, wake-up call. Good morning, Mr. Lundquist. It's 7:30 and 13 below zero. And it only got I remember walking in, Frank Gifford was doing one of the CBS. Joe Buck, Ray Scott, Frank Gifford, and I can't remember who the other one was. I go into the radio booth, the TV booth, and I saw Frank pick up pour a cup of coffee. They had a heater with a coffee pot on, pour it, and then lift it up and turned it upside down, and the coffee had frozen. And,
That's
Did
cool.
you have the Hail Mary? Did you have the Hail Mary game with Staubach and Pearson against the Vikings? That would have been, what, 75?
Yeah.
Wow.
How amazing was that?
Yeah, it sure was.
That was the birth of the expression Hail Mary, correct?
Yes, it was. Yeah, we were in Minnesota, and Frank Gleber, the late Frank Gleber, who sadly he was one of the great broadcasters ever. And Frank is another who died young. He was 51 and died of a heart attack while jogging. And he was the sports director at KRLD Radio, who had the rights to the Cowboy broadcast, but he also did CBS. And so Frank flew in, and the deal was whenever he was available, he and I would split halves. So Frank flew in to Minneapolis. He won the toss. He said, "I'll do the second half." So I did the first half play-by-play, and then I was color for the second half, and vice versa with Frank. And
like
then
a baseball game.
Yeah. And then with about 5 minutes to go, I got on the elevator, went down, walked in. Back then in Old Metropolitan Stadium, both teams stood on the same side of the field. And so I was in the middle waiting to do the post-game interview and standing, and then Drew Pearson made the Hail Mary catch. And the South stands got real angry, and some guy threw a pint of scotch and hit the back judge, Armin Terzian, in his head and dropped him.
Man.
And so now the crowd is really riled up. And when the game ended, the Cowboys won. And by the way, Drew Pearson did push off. He might admit it now. But anyway, Rayfield Wright was the All-Pro, Hall of Fame tackle, a big 6'7" guy from Fort Valley State. And he looked down at me, he said, "Little buddy, it's about to get angry here. So you follow Big Cat." And he put his parka over my head. And that's how we exited.
Oh, man.
Man, what a
That's
story.
unbelievable. That's unbelievable. Vern, we could do this for hours. I don't want to keep you longer, even though every story is so engaging from beginning to end. Again, your career is beyond words. We talked about economy of words. It's beyond words in so many ways with what you were able to accomplish over so many decades. And I just hope, first off, I hope you get Happy Gilmore too. That would certainly be the right move if they're listening, Adam Sandler and company. But I hope that retirement treats you well the rest of the way, and hope you and your wife have so many great moments together without the grind of traveling from stadium and arena to stadium and arena and going through all those delays through Atlanta Hartsfield. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Can't thank you enough for the time. This was terrific, Vern.
Well, I enjoyed it very much. You guys have a great day.
Thank you much.
Thank you so much.
You got it. He is Vern Lundquist, one of one, joining us here on JC and Morgan. That is going to do it for us. We need to say so long. For our producer, Phil Mullinax, for JC, this is Mike. We'll see you next week on JC and Morgan.